India has direct skin in this game and the outcome of the Alaska summit, and that there be a quick resolution to the Ukraine conflict, not least because the secondary oil tariffs on India are dependent on a favorable outcome, a favorable peace to this three-year conflict. And also, what about the overall damage sustained by the India-US relationship, the strategic partnership, which for the last 25 years has stood the test of time, stood the test of at least 4 American presidencies, 2 different governments here in India, but now has taken some serious damage because of Trump's decisions. Joining me now is Sadanand Dhume. He's a Wall Street Journal columnist, also a fellow with the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you very much, Sadanand, for speaking with us. It's been a crazy week of diplomacy. Of course, huge stakes here in India for what has happened in Alaska, whether or not there will be a sustainable peace between Ukraine and Russia, and what is likely to happen later tonight when President Zelensky will be joined by a host of European leaders, and they will be hosted in the White House. They will be discussing what happened in Alaska between President Trump and President Putin. Of course, India has huge skin in the game because of the secondary Russian oil tariffs on importing Russian oil. Now the US president says, well, I will consider what to do with those tariffs in a few weeks' time. Talk to us about this and really the very large implications of what has happened in the last week, 2 weeks, of a very damaging turn that Indo-US ties have taken explicitly because of President Trump and his actions.
Things are good, never a dull moment. I guess that's the sort of, if you want to, find a silver lining in every cloud, I guess that's what I would say. But yeah, absolutely, you're right. It's a tumultuous time. And a lot of things have happened in the last few weeks that, many of us who have been tracking this relationship for years would not have seen coming.
I just want to focus for a minute on what happened in Alaska before we come to the India-US and the consequences that the Alaska meeting would have on the India-US relationship. Now it's appearing clearer and clearer that Trump, instead of going for a ceasefire, which is what he wanted before that meeting happened, in the run-up to that meeting, he was saying ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. But now he's pivoting more towards the Russian position, which is an overall comprehensive peace agreement, which is, of course, harder to negotiate, would take more time. What may that mean for India and the consequence of these Russian oil tariffs?
Look, I think what seems quite clear so far is that there's not going to be any fresh secondary sanctions, right? I think Trump was quite clear about that in one of his interviews to Fox News. The question that is very relevant from an Indian perspective is, does that mean that the additional 25% that has been slapped on India goes away? Now, logically, I think India has a very strong case to make to say that, well, if you're not going ahead with secondary sanctions, you have not slapped on secondary sanctions on the Chinese, who are obviously the biggest trading partner of the Russians by far. You haven't done anything to the Turks and other Europeans or other kind of consumers of Russian energy. Why are you singling out India? I think that argument, which was always a strong argument, becomes stronger just purely on the merits. But that said, whether or not this means that the Trump administration is going to see reason and see logic, and at the very least roll back that 25%, that I'm not in a position to say.
So the second 25%, the oil tariffs, really is a symptom of the problem, not the problem itself, because there is a larger problem. And that is one of the principles of this relationship. Donald Trump, he's willing to completely blow a hole through this strategic partnership, a partnership that's endured the test of time, endured 4 previous US administrations, at least 2 different political dispensations here in India. And Trump is willing to literally throw that under the bus because he feels that there is some tactical win to be had by doing so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you're absolutely right. It's hard to imagine any previous American president, certainly going back to all the way to Bill Clinton, doing this kind of thing. And I think a lot of it sort of comes down to the fact that President Trump is quite unique in the sense of his obsession with tariffs. He keeps talking about tariffs as his sort of favorite word. And his idea of allowing trade relationship or trade negotiations to really be more important than everything else, right? So they've siloed the decision making, and you have the defense relationship that's going on. You have the larger strategic relationship. You have various sort of components, including tech cooperation, and then you've got this trade deal. And, one might expect that mature power is going to weigh all these things together, and that some of the other elements of the relationship are going to have, come to bear on what the trade deal is finally. So far, that hasn't happened. But I did write a piece in the Wall Street Journal where I argued that, look, it's not 100% clear that this is going to that this is going to be finally what it looks like. One can imagine a situation still where the 25% is taken off right away because we're not going for the U.S. is not going for secondary sanctions against Russia, and that some kind of deal is arrived at that allows the remaining 25% to be brought down to 15%, which is the level that countries like Korea and South Korea and Japan are paying. And if that is the final outcome, I'm not saying that will be the outcome, but if that is the final outcome, I do think this U.S.-India relationship can be rescued, and then you and I and all the others who observe this will look back upon these few weeks as a kerfuffle. If, on the other hand, 50% remains, then I think we're in for some serious trouble for the relationship.
So, but before I get to the question about what can India do to try and sort of manage this relationship, there's this hugely damaging turn it's taken in the last few weeks. Do we know how we got to this point? Is it because India refused to give credit to Trump for the ceasefire between India and Pakistan? Or is it that Trump genuinely believes that he can strong-arm India into, opening up more trade, opening up its agricultural and dairy sector, for example? What is your best possible explanation for why things got so bad?
It's a great question. So, the way I see it, I think there are elements of it that are to do with the deal itself, and there are elements of it that are to do with other things outside of it, right? And so I think on the negotiation itself, it's my understanding that India made a very attractive offer, and in fact, an offer that any previous American administration, any previous set of trade negotiators would have jumped at because it was more generous than any offer that India had made before. However, from the Trump administration's perspective, when they looked around and they saw the kinds of offers that they were getting from other countries, right, like Indonesia basically going to 0% tariffs, the EU coming in, bending the knee and saying, well, you can have something for nothing, and so on. The very attractive investment offers that were put on the table by the Japanese and the South Koreans and so on. I think that when all those other offers started pouring in comparison, the Indian offer did not look as attractive. That's the first part. The second is that, Trump already had a certain set of grudges against India. I don't think they were, entirely unmerited, right? But he's referred to India as the tariff king. He's been, in his first term, as you might recall, he was really upset by Indian duties on Harley Davidson at that time. So there's been a sort of reputation in Washington of India being particularly tough as a trade negotiator, and also having particularly high tariffs, difficult place to do business for many American businesses, and so on. And I think that kind of also added to Trump's belligerence. And then finally, I think the way things played out in the aftermath of Operation Sindoor, where Trump, very quickly tweeted and took credit, and then that kind of created a set of political problems domestically in India, and India sort of, moved very, very fast to say that no such thing happened, and the Pakistanis, of course, stepped into the breach and immediately kind of nominated President Trump for a Nobel Prize. I think that part also, probably contributed to this general souring of the mood.